The granddaddy of competitive Mortal Kombat games. Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 were both played at an extremely high level among the arcade community, but it was the birth of online gaming that allowed Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 to rise above and take the community to the next level of grinding and competition. On October 2006, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 was released on the Xbox Live Arcade. It featured a remarkably close resemblance to the real arcade version and had a near flawless netplay, with ranked matches and even a 4-person lobby system, opening up the chance for players all around the world to easily get matched together without needing emulators or other more complicated methods. The game developed to what became a globally played MK title. For those of you that may have been wondering, what made UMK3 tick on a competitive level and how did it work? This video is for you. Let's take a journey into the MK meta of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3.
Excellent.
Now before we get started, this video is captured on a hack that enabled Noob Saibot and Human Smoke as playable characters by default. This isn't in the base game, but much easier to record with as they're selectable as normal. First things first, let's talk about combos. They existed in MK games before 3 of course, but the built-in combo system debuted with Mortal Kombat 3. The game had 4 attack buttons: high punch, low punch, high kick, and low kick. Pressing attack buttons in a specific order up close will execute combo strings. Some will launch, and some cause a knockdown. You can use characters' special moves after specific attacks to continue the combo for more damage. Sound familiar? Of course it does. It pretty much shaped the way combos in Mortal Kombat games would function for over a decade after it, and still going, only back then they were called dialer combos. The weird thing is that some combos were so long that one of the attack buttons you had to use mid-combo was the block button. Jax or Liu Kang, for example, had the block button as part of their main combo string. Feels strange now, but that's just how it was back then. Combos were a major part of the game, and that is because of launchers. Using combo strings would temporarily drain your stamina bar, but you could still combo off launchers with a variety of things. Jump-ins, high punches that set up for extra damage after it, or even special moves if the game would allow it. It all pieced together into what would become some pretty flashy combos for its time. Of course, I don't have the execution to do the stylish ones, but even combo artists to this day have blown our minds with some exceptionally swaggy combos with pretty much the entire cast. Oh yeah, and Cyrax. This is how he began. Yes, combos have always been his thing.
Flawless victory.
Now, Mortal Kombat 3 introduced the run button. At this stage, no MK game had dashes of any kind. You simply walked backwards or forwards. MK3 added the run feature, which was this game's answer to faster movement. Simply press the run button while moving forward and you'll start to run in a forward-facing direction. You only had a limited amount of stamina before it had to regenerate, just like Mortal Kombat X. It opened up an automatic, aggressive style of play. The game had no fast way to move backwards, making the player feel like the only way to play was to advance. This went hand in hand with other rushdown tools, such as the run jab. Run jabbing was a universal mechanic that every character had access to. While being as close as possible to the opponent, low punch would act as your grab button. This went through block and beat most up-close buttons if you grabbed early enough. However, you could actually avoid being grabbed, so long as you just held back. Instead of being grabbed, you'll either get hit by the jab, or pushed back a little if you're blocking and holding back at the same time. If you still had stamina to work with after the run jab, you could instantly run forward again and press the jab button for another time, creating what we know as run jab pressure. But how do you defend against run jabs besides just holding back? Pressing a button or trying to move out of the way often resulted in being hit. To get out of run jabs, you had to poke out with a low attack, which essentially low-profiled the jab, the most popular option being a crouched low kick. This would push the opponent too far away to continue and gave you some breathing space for your next move. Here comes the meta. Up close, the mix-up was if you thought the opponent would do a low attack to poke out of the run jab pressure, you'd go for a combo string that starts with a kick. The animation always began with a close knee attack, and it actually functioned as a low crush, beating their low clean and granting you a full combo. The mix-up was run jab or low crush. Block the low crush and you're pushed away to safety. Block the run jab and their stamina gets closer to running out, on top of you having another shot to interrupt with a low and get back to a safe distance. As the aggressor, you would low crush on a read of them trying to interrupt. It's as simple as that. Now we know how the basics of aggression worked, let's talk about the low crush in greater detail. This was a major factor in defining certain characters. If you were able to land big damage off a low crush, you would instantly be considered capable. Characters like Human Smoke, Cabal, Ermac, and Jax, to name a few, all had great damage off their low crush strings, whilst characters like Sector and Cyrax had non-existent damage off their kick strings, making their up-close game weaker than most. If you didn't get damage off a low crush, you needed to have damage elsewhere to make up for it. There was another factor at play though: hitboxes.
You will never win.
Hitboxes played a major part in UMK3. Hitboxes were so varied that there were no set BMBs that covered the entire cast. If a character had a smaller hitbox, your combo had to be adjusted accordingly. Shiva and Shang Tsung had the most awkward hitboxes, and the most scenarios where a max damage combo would not be possible on them. Kung Lao and Liu Kang being similar, but not as extreme. Some characters were so small that a punch string wouldn't connect after a jump in. You had to dedicate to a kick instead, which cut damage for characters who, once again, couldn't get damage off a low crush. On the other hand, the male ninjas all shared the same hitbox due to being palette swaps, making them all universally easy to combo. Jax had a very large hitbox as well, making max damage combos significantly easier to land against him. The rest of the cast were varied as you'd expect. It was a matter of learning what works against who and getting familiar over time. Unfortunately, as games develop over time, certain techniques may be discovered that alter the experience for the worse. Glitch jabs are one of those examples. If you input any jabs, high punch or low punch, and while repeatedly inputting jab, you hold down and block, you can instantly block any attack whilst your jabs are coming out. This technique meant that you covered an area of the screen with jabs whilst at no risk whatsoever, creating a problematic neutral where your advances just became a lot harder without really being able to do anything about it. The community wouldn't sit there and let that define the game though, as other measures would come into play in the near future.
Superb.
Now, we're not going to touch on tier lists as such, that's a video for another day, but instead, here is some crazy stuff that you could do with some of the cast. Striker had a loop where he could launch you into a gunshot, close in the space with his baton charge, and simply do a couple of jabs into another gunshot. Rinse and repeat, and this would loop into massive damage. Hitboxes varied, but against the male ninjas, super easy. Kung Lao had a spin loop. He could infinite this in the corner and drag you into said corner by looping it from a jumping dive kick. Cyrax bombs! Unblockable, and you basically died if you got hit by one. The character still wasn't very good though. Bombs were super situational. Cabal. Ha! Human Smoke was basically Scorpion but better in every way. Better walk speed. Better low options as he could actually launch whilst retaining the air throw that both characters had access to. If you wanted to play a Scorpion, just pick Human Smoke. You have a lot more fun.
Finish him.
How can we talk about UMK3 without touching on the finishing moves? Of course, each character had 2 fatalities each, but each game introduced new forms of finishing moves, and UMK3 brought something to the table called Mercy. Mercy only worked on round 3. During finish him, jump back once, hold run, and press down 3 times. This would bring your opponent back from the dead with a pixel of life remaining. Kill them again, and from here, you can perform your animality. Just like any other fatality input, the animality was a stylish way to finish them off, but had the cool gimmick of turning you into an animal. Some were cool, some a bit strange.
Animality.
But of course, we saved the best for last. Friendships and babalities. Both were only possible if you defeated your opponent without blocking. Friendships would be a nice little way of saying, "Good games, friend, I'll let you live." Whereas babalities were just one big giant middle finger that said, "Mate, beating you was so easy that I didn't even need to block to get the win." As you might expect in competitive play, babalities were quite the message to send, a great storyline builder for the community's more confident players.
Fatality.
In 2014, the community itself would release a new version of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, UMK3 Tournament Edition. This was a major breath of fresh air to those that still played, and longed for certain unbalanced aspects of the game to be changed. Glitch jabs were among the first of many things to be removed, along with weaker characters receiving significant upgrades. Sector, for example, was still unable to launch off his kick string, but now he can end the string in a homing missile for setup. Cyrax had the same thing. He could now end his combo string in a bomb drop, keeping pressure after bagging decent damage, seeing as bombs were his entire game plan. The main thing this version did was keep the core playstyle of each character, but slightly weaken overpowered tools of top tiers and made the weaker characters more capable in high level matches. Due to the efforts of prominent community members in the States, such as Shock, 995, Summoning, and The Prophet, for example, the game went from essentially zero competitive interest back in 2002 to consistent 32-man brackets in 2010. This, of course, was before the release of Mortal Kombat 9. Although they played for a long time indeed, you'd see some familiar faces among those playing, creating a competitive tie to Mortal Kombat that would re-emerge in the future. L.I. Joe with his human smoke, Chris G with his reptile as always, and of course, Rio with a bunch of different characters. As we all know, he likes to play the board in basically every game that he touches. UMK3 finally saw a sharp decline in tournament interest once Mortal Kombat 9 hit the scene. But even during the MK9 days, you would still see UMK3 side tournaments take place. Most of them would happen in the East Coast of America, the Combat Network stream being a popular place to catch the action if something was happening. It's unfortunate indeed that the 2006 online version of UMK3 was able to create a lot of buzz for fans that wanted to finally get involved, but due to certain issues around the MK Arcade Collection version that came out later on, such as speed differences and a little bit of input lag, continued interest was not able to be maintained like it could before. You still have players kicking around and going nuts in high-level UMK3 matches, some play on the original version and some play on the TE, but these days it's either done using emulators online, or when the rare chance happens, offline play at tournaments. That pretty much wraps things up for this episode of the MK Meta. This is something that we want to continue bringing to you guys, and can span across a bunch of different Mortal Kombat games, not just the mechanics of the game itself, but videos based on individual characters as well. We started with Ultimate MK3 as it's the first competitive MK game that we ever played. It holds a very special place in our hearts, and hopefully you enjoyed this very brief look into what made this wonderful game tick at a higher level. Lastly, huge thanks to Shock for helping me out with the details. This wouldn't have been as detailed without his help, so go drop him a follow on Twitter, and actually, there's an article online about the history of the competitive UMK3 scene. I'll link it in the description so you guys can check it out for yourself. It's quite the incredible read. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.